She landed on her chin. That's it. That's the whole distance between being the greatest gymnast on earth and never walking again. The width of a chin, the fraction of a second it takes a body to rotate 1.5 times instead of 2. 2 weeks before the Moscow Olympics, in a gym in Minsk, a 20-year-old woman attempted a move so dangerous it would later be banned from the sport entirely. She had done it 1,000 times before. This time, her body didn't finish the rotation. Her neck broke first. Her career ended a half-second later. And what happened to her afterward, the silence, the denial, the quiet campaign to make the world forget her name, is somehow more disturbing than the fall itself. Her name was Elena Mukhina, and before she became a warning sign for an entire sport, she was its future. She didn't come from privilege or comfort. By the time she was 5 years old, both of her parents were gone from her life. Her mother died young, her father left, and the details blur depending on who tells the story. What's certain is that a little girl in Moscow was raised by her grandmother in an apartment that offered structure but not softness. Gymnastics found her the way it found so many Soviet children in that era, not as a hobby, but as an assignment. Coaches walked through schoolyards looking for bodies built for the impossible. Elena had that body. What she also had, and what set her apart almost immediately, was something coaches couldn't teach: a willingness to feel no fear at all. By her teenage years, she wasn't just competing, she was rewriting what the sport thought was physically possible. She unveiled a full twisting double-back somersault on floor that nobody else in the world was doing, a move so far ahead of its time that it still carries her name in the code of points today, decades later. She invented a version of a bar release so daring that judges had never seen anything like it from a woman. Her tumbling passes weren't just difficult. They were borrowed from a vocabulary that belonged to men's gymnastics, translated into a body that moved like a dancer and hit like a gymnast twice her size. In 1978, at the World Championships in Strasbourg, she claimed the biggest prize the sport offers, the all-around world title, and became, at 18 years old, the face of the next Olympic cycle. The whole of Soviet gymnastics, a program that treated gold medals as a matter of national identity, began building its 1980 home Olympics around one gymnast. Here's what almost nobody watching her floor routines understood at the time. Every one of those revolutionary skills was a bet that the human spine could keep absorbing forces it was never designed for, over and over, without ever cashing in the debt. Elena was making that bet every single day, and for a while, she kept winning it. Then, in 1979, the bet came due for the first time. She broke her leg. For a rising star with an Olympics on home soil approaching, an injury like that isn't just physical. It's a countdown clock. Every day in a cast is a day a rival closes the gap, a day selectors start whispering about who else might take her spot. The pressure to return wasn't just about her ambition anymore. It became about an entire nation's Olympic narrative resting on one recovering leg. So the cast came off early, before she felt ready. She said so herself, quietly, to people around her, and nobody listened, because there was no time left to listen. She went straight back into full training loads, and on top of the physical rehabilitation, she was pushed into cutting weight she'd gained during the months of inactivity. Picture that combination for a second. A partially healed leg, an exhausted, underfed body trying to relearn skills that used to be automatic, and a coaching staff with an Olympic deadline that didn't care how any of it felt from the inside. Into that exact storm, her coach added one more variable, the most dangerous one of all. It was called the Thomas Salto, named after the American gymnast who invented it, and it wasn't like anything else in women's gymnastics at the time. A backward salto and a half, spinning 1.5 twists through the air, landing not on your feet but rolling out onto your chest and shoulders on the mat. On paper, it made a strange kind of sense for Elena's situation, because it ended in a roll instead of a stuck landing. It was supposed to spare her still healing leg from absorbing impact. In practice, it demanded something far more dangerous than strong legs. It demanded perfect rotation, every single time, because there is a very narrow window between rotating enough to roll out safely and rotating too little to land on anything but your neck. She reportedly voiced concern about the move more than once. This wasn't a secret to the people around her, but by the summer of 1980, Elena Mukhina wasn't just training a new skill, she was training inside a machine that had already decided her value depended on making the Olympic team, no matter what her body was telling anyone. If a story like this, a champion built up by an entire system, then quietly discarded by that same system the moment things went wrong, pulls you in the way it's pulling me in right now, this is exactly the kind of history this channel exists to dig up. Gymnastics has produced some of the most breathtaking human achievements you'll ever see, and also some of its darkest, least told chapters. If you want more of both sides of that story, subscribe now, because what happened to Elena in the weeks after this moment is far more disturbing than the injury itself, and we're only getting started. By July of 1980, the Olympics were 17 days away, and Elena was at a pre-Olympic training camp in Minsk. It was there that she got the news that would change everything that happened next. She learned she wasn't going to make the Olympic lineup, not officially confirmed, not yet final, but close enough that everyone around her understood which way the decision was heading. For a gymnast who had spent a year rebuilding her body specifically for this moment, that piece of information landed like a verdict. Accounts differ on exactly what drove her into the gym alone that day. Some say she wanted one final chance to prove she still belonged on that team. Some point to a deeper detail, that her personal coach, the man who had built the Thomas Salto into her routine in the first place, was hundreds of miles away in Moscow at that exact moment, lobbying officials to keep her Olympic spot alive through political channels, rather than standing beside her in the gym. Whatever the full truth is, what's not disputed is this. On July 3, 1980, Elena Mukhina attempted the Thomas Salto without the coach, who understood the skill best, standing anywhere near the mat. She rotated. Not enough. Her chin struck the floor first, and the force traveled straight up through her neck. In an instant, a 20-year-old who had spent her entire life training her body to do things no other woman on earth could do, lost the ability to move that body at all, from the chest down. Witnesses later described something almost impossible to process. That in the seconds right after the fall, before anyone fully understood the extent of the damage, Elena's first reaction wasn't panic. It was something closer to relief. Relief that, whatever came next, the relentless grind that had consumed every waking hour of her life for over a decade was finally over. She was rushed into emergency surgery in Minsk before being transferred back to Moscow. What followed wasn't just a medical recovery. It was a cover-up. Soviet officials, with an Olympics about to open on home soil in front of the entire world, could not afford the story of their brightest star's paralysis to dominate the headlines, so they simply denied it. Officials told the press that Mukhina has all her reflexes. They stated plainly that she was not paralyzed. These weren't offhand comments. They were repeated claims, made days apart, each one a deliberate contradiction of what doctors already knew. The story shifted again and again as the games approached, first calling her condition temporary, then quietly reframing the entire incident as something that happened because Elena had gone rogue, training a move on her own, against her coach's wishes, purely out of personal ambition. The blame, in other words, was moved from the system that built the pressure cooker onto the 20-year-old who broke inside it. Here's the part of this story that should genuinely disturb you. While Soviet officials were rewriting the narrative in real time, it was Elena's own competitors who refused to let her be erased. When Elena Davidova won the all-around gold medal at those very Olympics, the medal that, under different circumstances, many believed belonged to Mukhina, she didn't celebrate it as a personal triumph. She said, publicly, that another gymnast deserved that podium more than any of them. She named Elena Mukhina. In a system built entirely around national glory and gold medal counts, a rival athlete was the one person willing to say the quiet part out loud. Elena spent close to a year in the spinal department of a Moscow hospital, relearning how to exist inside a body that no longer obeyed her. She eventually moved into an apartment customized for her condition, arranged through the city council, a small mercy inside a much larger institutional silence. The Gymnastics Federation that had once built an entire Olympic narrative around her face became, almost overnight, an organization that rarely spoke her name at all. What she carried afterward wasn't just physical paralysis. Elena became famously private, granting only a handful of interviews across the rest of her life. And in the ones she did give, she didn't hold back on what she thought of the program that shaped her. She criticized Soviet gymnastics directly, accusing it of deceiving the public and chasing gold medals at any human cost. But perhaps the most haunting thing she ever said had nothing to do with blame at all. Years later, speaking with a specialist who cared for her, she reflected on an old memory, a moment as a younger athlete when she'd brushed off a girl with cerebral palsy who had approached her for an autograph, responding with unkind words she clearly still carried guilt over. She told her caregiver that she believed her own paralysis was some kind of punishment for that single moment of cruelty. Think about that for a second. A 20-year-old woman, betrayed by an entire sporting system that used her body until it broke and then buried the truth about how it happened. And the explanation she reached for wasn't anger at the people who failed her. It was guilt she placed entirely on herself. Elena Mukhina lived with quadriplegia for 26 more years. She passed away in December of 2006, at 46 years old, in Moscow, the same city that once built an Olympic dream around her. Her legacy didn't disappear, even if her name was pushed out of the spotlight for years. The Thomas Salto, and every skill that shared its dangerous rollout landing, was eventually banned from women's gymnastics entirely, a direct, if quietly acknowledged, consequence of what happened to her that July afternoon in Minsk. Every gymnast who has competed safely on floor since then has done so, in part, because Elena Mukhina's body absorbed a risk that the sport refused to reckon with until it was far too late to help her. There's something almost unbearable about the shape of this story. A girl with no parents by the age of 5 builds herself, through sheer will, into the most innovative gymnast of her generation. She survives poverty and loss to become a world champion, and the very system that celebrated her for being fearless is the same one that pushed her, injured and exhausted, toward a move it knew was dangerous, then spent the next several days lying to the entire world about what that decision cost her. The tragedy here was never really about a single bad landing. It was about a machine that valued a gold medal count more than the 20-year-old carrying it, and a girl who was taught her whole life that pain was simply the price of greatness, right up until the moment it took everything from her at once. If this story moved you the way it moved me putting it together, I want to know what stayed with you the most. Was it the injury itself, or the silence that came after it? Tell me in the comments, because I read every single one, and stories like Elena's are exactly why this channel exists. This isn't the only gymnast whose brilliance got buried under a system that failed her, and if you want to make sure you don't miss the ones still coming, subscribe and turn on notifications now. There are more of these stories waiting, athletes the world celebrated for a moment and then quietly forgot, and I'd love for you to be here when we tell the next one.